Imagine a case in the world of chess, where an experienced grandmaster, whose fingers knew every pat, whose eyes had seen thousands of combinations, was defeated by an absolute beginner. This man, who had devoted decades to studying the science of chess, analyzing openings and endgames, was defeated by someone who had touched the chessboard for the first time. Incredible, but true. The beginner played without knowing the rules. He moved pieces in ways that seemingly should not work, but somehow, in some unfathomable way, it brought success. The grandmaster lost not because of a lack of skill, but because of a mental trap created by expectations and the framework of conventional strategies. He had spent a lifetime honing his skills within established boundaries, while his opponent didn't even realize they existed. This begs the question, what if each of us is just as limited in our perception of reality? What if we have been taught for years what is real, what is possible, what is normal? We have been given instructions on how to live our lives, what to believe, how to react to certain events. We follow these instructions not because we made a conscious choice, but because it never occurred to us that we could do otherwise. Imagine a situation where someone tries to convince you that gravity only exists because of your belief in it. It seems absurd, doesn't it? However, let's play with this idea a bit. What if your growing up was in a world where people floated freely in the air like weightless feathers? You probably wouldn't have paid much attention to it, taking it for granted as an integral part of the reality around you. But imagine what would happen if a person from this world were suddenly transported to our world, where gravity reigns supreme. He would certainly experience shock. Desperately trying to cling to any surface like a frightened animal. The point is that reality is not just a set of objective facts. It is what we accept and recognize as real in our minds. To illustrate this point, I suggest a little experiment. Regardless of where you are now, try to look around carefully and note all the objects of red color that come into your field of vision. Try to scrutinize your surroundings, memorizing all the red details. And now, without looking away, try to answer the question, how many objects of blue color did you notice? Chances are you'll find that your brain, being focused on finding the red, simply ignored everything else. And if something as simple as color can escape your attention simply because you didn't expect to see it, how many other things are beyond your perception? Now let me share with you a thought that may change the way you think about going to restaurants and cafes forever. There is an interesting psychological trick in the sphere of human interaction. If you start nodding your head involuntarily during a conversation, your interlocutor is more likely to agree with your point of view, even without realizing the reasons for this decision. It is worth thinking about how many professional salespeople, experienced politicians, and influential people use this gesture like doves, persistently convincing us that they are right. Once you pay attention to this peculiarity, it will become obvious. However, this is not just a psychological trick. It is a mechanism that shapes our perception of reality. The human brain tends to sift out information that doesn't fit with established beliefs. This means that anything we believe to be real may turn out to be a skillfully created illusion. The big question is, who determines what we should see? It has already been established that the mind filters the reality around us based on our expectations. But there is more to it than that. There have been moments in everyone's life when, upon entering a room, they suddenly forget the purpose of their visit. A second ago, there was a clear task, certainty of the need to take or do something, but at the moment of crossing the threshold, everything evaporated, as if by magic. Imagine the situation. A person is frozen in place with an absent expression, as if suddenly doubting the very essence of his existence. Scientists have dubbed this phenomenon the doorway effect. The brain, this tireless worker, erases recent events from memory as soon as a person changes the environment. The reason lies in its rationality. Once in a new room, in a new context, the brain decides that everything that was important before has lost its relevance. But what if this effect extends beyond changing rooms? What if the brain gets rid of entire ideas? A person encounters something incredible, a concept that radically changes his worldview. The idea stuns him, perhaps even lingers in his memory for a few hours, but a day or two passes and it disappears, like a dream that seemed meaningful while the person was asleep, but instantly vanishes upon awakening. And this is where the worry arises. What if this happens all the time? Think back to your childhood, when your imagination turned ordinary things into exciting adventures. In childhood, an ordinary cardboard box was transformed in the imagination into an interstellar ship, an impregnable castle, or a mysterious portal to other dimensions. However, with the passage of time and growing up, this amazing ability gave way to pragmatism and calculation. But when you think about it, practicality is just a euphemism for the limiting beliefs that stifle creativity. Modern society favors predictability and stereotyping. It rewards those who follow established patterns and do not deviate from accepted norms. Under the influence of these trends, the human mind is gradually shedding the wild and boundless thinking of childhood. This process resembles a self-cleaning system that removes all elements that do not conform to a given form. It is interesting to note that, having once seen an optical illusion, a person can no longer distract himself from it. This is because the brain instantly fixates on the new perspective as soon as it recognizes it as useful. But what happens in the opposite direction? How do we explain those things that the brain intentionally erases from memory? Despite the fact that modern man has access to all the books, scientific discoveries, and knowledge that humanity has accumulated throughout history, most people prefer to stay within familiar mental boundaries. This shows that the conscious desire to limit one's own potential is a common phenomenon in modern society. It is not a matter of limited physical vision, but of the mind's unwillingness to expand the boundaries of perception. At the moment, there is a vast dead zone in everyone's world picture, an area that has been erased from consciousness before its existence is realized. A natural question arises: how objective is the reality perceived by a person? The brain, like a strict gatekeeper of an elite club, sifts through information, letting in only what it considers relevant and discarding everything else. Herein lies the paradox. If the brain determines what a person sees, remembers, and perceives as reality, who actually controls this process? Everyone has probably encountered a situation where, in an argument, an opponent throws out the phrase, "You always do that," prompting an instant objection. However, after a while, in a moment of solitude, the thought creeps in. Maybe there is some truth to that. This is an example of the brain's defense mechanism at work, blocking real-time information for the sake of preserving the integrity of its own version of reality. Just as the human mind censors insignificant memories, it also screens out feedback about itself, because the very last thing it wants is to engender doubt in an individual, since it has been so painstakingly molded over many years. It is for this reason that people are capable of denying obvious truths, even when the evidence lies before their eyes. The moment something poses a threat to the version of reality that the brain has constructed, it is immediately rejected. This is not about logic, but about the instinct of mental self-preservation. And this doesn't just apply to personal beliefs. Surely, everyone has noticed how, after learning a new word, it starts to occur everywhere. Or, when you buy a new car, it seems that everyone around you drives the same model. This phenomenon is known as the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, or, as it is also called, the brain-playing games again syndrome. The mind didn't hide these things before. The person just didn't pay attention to them. But now that the focus of attention has shifted, the brain allows these things to exist in the perceived reality. The danger lies in the brain's ability to hide the true picture of the world, allowing information to reach consciousness only when it deems it necessary. This begs the question: how many other aspects of reality remain blocked? Not because they don't exist, but because attention was never directed to finding them. It is for this reason that many people find themselves locked in a cycle of the same thoughts and actions, marveling at the predictability of their existence. The brain, like a broken record, plays the same limited script over and over again. It is important to realize that thinking is just a habit, modifiable like any other. However, the longer the brain controls the perception filter, the harder it becomes to see the world behind the walls it has erected. The secret to controlling reality lies not so much in acquiring new knowledge as in the ability to notice what one has been trained to ignore. As soon as a person begins to pay attention to details that the brain usually filters out, the world around him begins to transform. How can we regain control over the mind if it, like a skillful director, discreetly edits, discards, and gives a verdict on the reality of what is happening before we even realize it? Herein lies the difficulty. The mere knowledge of the existence of this system makes it impossible to deceive it. It is like being aware of yourself in a dream, but not being able to wake up. Remember how often you have tried to hold a dream in your mind immediately upon waking, but it slipped away like a mirage as soon as you focused on it, as if it had never happened. This is the brain's reality filter in action. It doesn't just remove the unnecessary, it makes it so that you can't even remember what was once clear. And it does the same thing with your everyday thoughts. Do a little experiment. Focus on something that genuinely excites you, that makes your heart beat more often. Perhaps it's a bold idea, a dream job, or something you've always wanted to try but never decided to. Now, take a close look at what happens immediately after that thought crosses your mind. What feelings and sensations arise? What arguments against immediately appear in your mind? It is quite possible that a counter-argument arises in your mind, a kind of inner voice saying, "This is utopia." You don't have a single free minute for this. Suppose it fails, what then? The brain, like a vigilant guardian, sees new ideas as a potential threat to the established system. Predictability is prioritized over perspective, because the latter is inextricably linked to change, and change, in turn, involves risk, even when there is no real danger. The brain reacts as if it exists. Think of the feeling of a slight vibration in your pocket when your hand reaches for your phone, expecting a notification, but it's empty. This phenomenon, known as phantom vibration syndrome, occurs because the brain has become so accustomed to the constant stream of notifications that it generates this sensation on its own. Now, imagine that this principle extends to all other expectations of the brain. If it expects difficulties, they are bound to arise. If it is convinced that opportunities are rare, they will slip away. If it is determined to expect the worst, it will find confirmation of its fears everywhere. Reality will remain the same until expectations change. At this point, the brain is like a GPS navigator, stuck on an outdated route. There is a common belief that everyone believes they are the best navigator along life's path, even if their actions result in going in circles. It is this belief that many believe is the main reason why people find themselves stuck in life's dead ends. The problem is not the lack of more effective ways of development, but the fact that the human mind rejects these opportunities before they can be seen. Surprisingly, scientific research shows that the brain begins to shape a person's future actions before they even consciously make a decision. For example, before your hand reaches for a refreshing drink, your brain is already sending the appropriate signals. Before your fingers type a text message, the decision to do so has already been made on a subconscious level. And even before a seemingly random idea comes into your head, your brain is already actively processing it in the background. This raises an important question. How conscious is a person's choice if their brain determines in advance what thoughts and actions are possible? If the brain decides what is realistic and achievable, even before a person has time to weigh the pros and cons, how large is the share of truly conscious decisions in his or her life? Thus, a legitimate question arises. If the brain preselects options for the development of events, thus defining the limits of the possible, is a person able to regain control over his or her own life and destiny? This is where the most amazing thing begins. The human brain not only prioritizes, but also decides what should go unnoticed. Think of a situation when you lost your keys, searched every corner, and then found them right in front of you. This was not a manifestation of your absent-mindedness. Rather, your brain was sifting through information in real time. This phenomenon, known as inattention, arises from the brain's desire to maximize efficiency. It filters out anything that doesn't meet its expectations. Let's say your brain has already decided that the keys are not on the table. In that case, you literally won't see them, even if your eyes have registered their presence. The brain simply blocks out that information. Now, imagine how this affects every other aspect of your life. If the brain expects difficulty, it ignores evidence that things could be different. If it is set up for rejection, it ignores signs of acceptance. If he prepares for the worst, he blinds you to favorable opportunities. That's why it seems that some people manage to attract luck without much effort, while others, no matter how hard they try, stay where they are. Perception, not blind luck, shapes our reality. If cognitive processes ignore certain aspects, it's as if they cease to exist for us. Surprisingly, the brain doesn't just filter out information, but actively constructs it by filling in the gaps with conjecture. In one experiment, participants were shown a series of images, where the first one represented one face and the next one represented a completely different face. However, when they were asked to describe what they saw, the vast majority did not notice the switch. The subjects' brains had imperceptibly combined the two different faces, creating an image of a non-existent person in their minds. Their memories were instantly distorted, without them even realizing it. Such processes occur in the brain all the time. Take, for example, memories from childhood. The more often we mentally revisit them, the less accurate they become. Why? Each time we retrieve a memory, the brain slightly rewrites it, filling in missing details and correcting inaccuracies. This updated version then replaces the original one, similar to what happens in a game of damaged telephone, where the original message is distorted with each transmission. It is quite possible that some of the most vivid moments of the past stored in memory may turn out to be figments of fantasy. If we analyze how the human brain works, it becomes obvious that it subjects incoming information to a rigid filtering process, eliminating everything that does not correspond to the existing ideas about the world. Moreover, it tends to fill gaps in memories with fictitious details, creating a coherent, but often far from the truth. Each time a memory is revisited, it is partially altered, as if the brain is constantly rewriting history. Despite all these distortions, people tend to trust their brains unconditionally. There is a naive confidence in the accuracy of perception, the reliability of memories, and the authenticity of one's own thoughts. But how justified is such faith? How can we distinguish reality from a skillfully created illusion when the brain is continuously deleting, distorting, and rewriting events in real time? It is important to realize that most people never realize the metamorphosis happening to them. They live their lives in the belief that they see, remember, and believe the absolute truth. This is not because they have subjected their beliefs to rigorous testing, but because it has never occurred to them to question their infallibility. And that seems to be the intent of the system that governs human perception. Hardly anyone hears the truth in the pompous speech of the motivational speaker. The vast majority of people remain the same. The reason lies not in a lack of potential for change, but in a banal lack of awareness of the need for change. Haven't you ever noticed how some individuals seem to inhabit a parallel universe, even though they are in the same reality? These lucky people, like a magnet, attract favorable opportunities. Their lives seem to be fine-tuned, and complex tasks are solved with remarkable ease. The secret lies not in a fortunate coincidence at birth, but in their unique perception of the surrounding reality. They are able to see what escapes the gaze of others, and it is not because of superior intelligence or any special qualities, but because their mental filter does not block valuable information. From childhood, people are taught to be content with a certain version of reality, not allowing them to look beyond it. As soon as the mind becomes fixed on this imposed picture of the world, it begins to sift out everything that contradicts it. But there is a way out. Everyone is capable of reconfiguring their mental filter, teaching their brain to recognize opportunities, abandoning outdated templates, and stopping the endless repetition of outdated scenarios. Achieving significant change doesn't require life-transforming revelations. It all starts with gradual, small transformations. The first step is to critically rethink your long-held beliefs. You need to ask yourself, what are the reasons for believing what you believe? What are the origins of those beliefs? And, most importantly, who benefits from your adherence to these beliefs? The second step involves intentionally immersing yourself in situations that disrupt your usual mental framework. Have you ever noticed that when traveling, meeting new people, or learning something previously unknown, your brain feels a surge of energy and vigor? This is because new experiences disrupt perceptual filters, stimulating the brain to form new neural connections. The third step is to consciously track the moments when autopilot kicks in. Every time you catch yourself saying a phrase like, "I'm just that way," pause and reflect. Is this really true, or is it just a story you've been repeating to yourself over the years? The fact is that the vast majority of people will never take such a step. And the reason for this is not because of a lack of ability, but because their mental filters block the very possibility of questioning the reality around them. However, once the repetitive scenario is realized, it is possible to break it. And once the shackles of the familiar are thrown off, the world around them will begin to favor rather than hinder. At that moment, a person ceases to be a mere participant in the game. He becomes its creator, the one who sets the rules. Have you ever thought about how often you act on autopilot, as if following an invisible script? Have you noticed strange coincidences or inexplicable twists of fate, as if reality itself is playing with you? Share your thoughts in the comments. The author is interested in hearing about your experiences and views. If you are ready to explore the depths of this topic and find out how far these patterns extend, stay tuned, because this is just the beginning.